everybody, and welcome to another edition of Influencers. On this show, I talk to people who have a great deal of influence of the way the world ticks, the way the world goes around. I've had some incredible guests on the show. I've had on Lee Steinberg. If you don't know who Lee is, he's the real Jerry Maguire. And Lee changed professional football forever. He's represented dozens and dozens of number one picks in the NFL. I've had on the show Larry Thompson, one of the top producers and personal managers in Hollywood. And now I'm seeing on Facebook he's running for a congressman in Los Angeles. And he has a big heart and he's a real honest guy. And I bet he does really, really good things. So the quality of the people that I have on the show, Influencers, continues today. This show is very, very meaningful to me because my guest is my cousin who grew up in Montreal, Montreal, and I grew up in New York, then went to school in Boston. And all during those times, during the holidays, I'd get in my car and I'd go up and spend time with my Canadian family, who I love very much, including my cousin Dee Dee, my cousin Billy. Love them. We had so much fun together. Then they came down to Boston when I lived there, when I was in college, and we partied and had a great time. And then we got together down in Florida and partied and had a great time. And I just love Dee Dee, also known as Robert. And I love my other cousin, Billy. And I'm thrilled that Dee Dee, Robert F., has consented to come on the show. And he is a very, very special guy. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be able to say this properly, but my cousin Dee Dee, Robert F., was one of the founding members of CA, Cocaine Anonymous, in Canada. Now, if you're from the States, for as long as you've been alive and if you've had problems with alcohol, drug addiction, and a lot of other problems, you didn't even think twice about going to a 12-step meeting. But in Canada, up until, and my cousin Dee Dee will give us this information, there were no meetings to go to. You were on your own. My cousin is so incredible and cares so much about people that he and a few of his friends got together and said, we have to do something. And they started CA in Canada. Think about that. Started it. And imagine if it's gone on for, I know it's at least 30 years and probably closer to 40.
Yeah.
Imagine how many people they have helped by coming to terms with their own problem and saying, we have to do something about this for our Canadian friends and family and people that we don't even know. So I want to introduce my cousin Dee Dee. Love you, cuz. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm so glad that we're doing this together.
Bruce, it's a pleasure to be here. You can call me Dee Dee or you can call me Robert. They both work, and we go way back. And I'm just a regular fellow who was a little bit lost in my teens, in my early teens, and I needed to find a direction. I fell into addiction, and I did find a solution through AA and CA. I just want to let people know that I am abiding by one of our most important traditions is keeping anonymity at the level of press, radio, television, and film. So right now, I'm going to be talking about myself, and I want anybody who has a problem with drugs, alcohol, any type of mind-altering substance to feel comfortable to be able to go to a CA meeting and know that their anonymity will be kept. That's why my face is covered. You can't see my face. That's why my last name is not used. My anonymity is being upheld. So people should feel comfortable to come to meetings and knowing that their anonymity won't be broken. They won't be broadcast all over the city where they're at, that this person is a drug addict, alcoholic. And also, another reason is it's also good for our egos to keep our ego down, keep it smashed in a way. This is not about me. I'm just trying to pass on a message of how it worked for me, how I recovered. And God forbid if I started to show my face and use my last name and go in newspapers and go, look at me, as some celebrities do, which is okay. That's their life. You know, like these big names, they got many years of sobriety, some rock musicians and actors and actresses. But God forbid if they relapse, you know, and a lot of people do relapse, then it sometimes creates to new people looking for a solution a black eye for CA or AA or whatever fellowship it is. So that's why I am keeping my anonymity the way it is in our episode right here tonight, Bruce. Like I live in Montreal, and so we're bilingual here. We speak French, we speak English, and this is how we say CA in French: Cocainamon Anonymous. And hope, faith, courage is our three principles, and so they're translated. Hope for espoir, faith for foi, and courage is the same in both languages. That's our logo. And I'm wearing in my T-shirt the English logo, as you see it, Hope, Faith, and Courage.
So again, I want to thank you for coming on the show and opening up possibly a whole world of people out there that don't understand their addiction, are confused by it, know something is wrong, and don't know what to do about it. And so we're going to get more to that. But what I want to talk about in the beginning, Dee Dee, is our beginning. I would get in the car from New York or Boston and come up for the holidays and would have such a good time with you guys. You and Billy taught me how to play hockey. Now, we didn't have skates on because we get in the streets and we would, run around with a puck and a goalie sticks and pads and just had a great time. You guys taught me how to play hockey. Yeah. No one was doing that back in New York where I was from. And I want you to know, you're probably not even aware of this, but I took back to Yonkers, New York, what I learned from you guys and taught a lot of people in my neighborhood about hockey. And we started playing roller hockey. We started playing in the winter. We played ice hockey. And I remember me and a whole bunch of the kids, we lived in a high-rise apartment building that had several layers of very smooth cement for the parking garage. And come 7 o'clock at night, when people were already home, we'd get our roller skates and play roller hockey in the garage for hours until it was like too late and then our parents were worried about us. So that's the influence that you had even on me at that point, and I wanted you to know about that.
Very nice, Bruce. I'm happy that you became a star hockey player for the New York Rangers, and you won many Stanley Cups. And I know that's a fantasy that maybe you had, but I'm happy that you learned a little skills of hockey from us.
And I even went and started playing hockey at the local hockey rink, and I got myself a Montreal Canadian jersey and played with that
Nice.
jersey, and I loved the sport. I'd go out on those lakes and play until it was dark. I just loved it. So I want to thank you guys for introducing it. So, Didi, you and I, we've been together. We've been partying. We partied up in Canada. We partied in Boston. We partied in South Florida when you guys came down to Florida. And to me, we were just having a great time. I don't really remember doing much of anything other than, entertaining the ladies on the beach and going out and having a good time. But apparently, I wasn't aware maybe of your degree of maybe using whatever was going on back then. So can you kind of tell me how how did you progress from having a great time partying and having so much fun when we were together, and how and when did that change from partying to something more serious?
Right. Yeah, I remember vaguely some of those parties. But Bruce, you're a normie. Uh, what we call, like, I consider you more of a normal type of person that I would assume that, can have a couple of drinks and put it aside, or it's not even part of your character where you feel like you need it, or doing a line of cocaine and then needing to go out and get more and more and more. For me at that point, we were in our early teens. I was like 15, 16, 17 at that point. And I already knew at that point that I had a problem with substances, more cocaine, a lot of barbiturates, which are downers. Alcohol, I wasn't really a big drinker, as my father was an alcoholic, and I was basically a little bit fearful of becoming like him, coming home drunk and raging a bit. I didn't want to become like him, so I never really got into alcohol, and so I just felt a sense of a comfort when I was high. It felt good in the beginning. In the first few years, it was a social lubricant. I never really felt 100% comfortable with my friends. I was a jock. I played a lot of sports. Where all the girls were in my school at that point was in a different exit. They were hanging out at a different exit at the school, and those people were taking drugs. And I just went over there and I said, you know what, I'm going to take some drugs. It was that simple, my decision, and it became a social lubricant. Um, so between 15 and 20, Bruce, I became an addict. It was that quick. I needed to use barbiturates. I needed to do cocaine. I needed to get high on a daily basis. There was no escape from it, and it filled the hole that I felt inside of me. People who are listening, you know, I would assume if you do have a problem with some sort of substance, this is ringing a bell in you. This is ringing a bell. At 20 years old, I went to my first rehab. So from 15 to 20, I'm doing lots of drugs and alcohol. At 20, I already had gone through a few jobs, couldn't hold a job. My family was stressing out big time. They were pressuring me to go get help. And I did not believe I had a problem. It was you had the problem. It was my father who had the problem. It was the principal in school. It was my boss. And I was pointing the finger at everybody. And I was not the person who had a problem. But I needed to get everyone off my back. I had no other avenue. I wasn't a person on the street. I couldn't go on the street. It wasn't my makeup. And I went away to treatment. I was 20 years old. I went to a therapeutic community that was based on Daytop, which is Gestalt therapy. Daytop originally came out of New York City. And this was a treatment facility in the countryside outside of Montreal, about an hour outside of Montreal. A lot of treatment facilities now are 30-day, 60-day treatments. I went there for 13 months. So this is like 1975. I was born in 1955. And just to cut to the chase really quickly for people who've been on for a bit, my sobriety date is October 26, 1983. So I've been sober for 40 years. This
Wow.
October in 2 months, I'll be, it's almost to the date. What's the date today? It's August what?
27th.
27th. So it's exactly 2 months less a day. I'll be taking my 41-year cake in Cocaine Anonymous. And I've been going to meetings in this solution for over 40 years. I never stopped. So there is a possibility and there for long-term sobriety. So people who might have an issue who are listening now, maybe I quirk their ears a bit so they're a little bit more interested that this is not somebody who's just has maybe 18 months of sobriety and which is great, but or 2 years or five. I got 40 years and I've done it a day at a time. So I went to this treatment at 20. I came out after 13 months without a solution. They didn't have a solution. It was looking at myself. They try to help me look inside of myself to see what my character defects were and to tell me that I'm okay. And that was it. It was that simple. I don't have like a really clear, 100% clear memory, but there wasn't really a solution and there was no aftercare. So I'll skip through it real quick because the using part is really, maybe I'll talk about it a little bit so people can maybe relate a bit. But between 20 and 28, I continued to use drugs and alcohol on a really abusive way. I lost quite a few jobs. I was engaged to get married. My partner was an addict also. That never came to fulfillment. We were too high. We didn't know what was going on. All my friends were getting married, having children, going forward in their lives. And I was just trying to get high every day. I didn't have a penny in the bank. I started to hang out with undesirables, staying out to all hours. It was a nightmare. And I went to a couple of outpatient treatment facilities, trying to get this monkey off my back, and to no avail. It didn't work. The crazy thing about it, and people will relate to this, is that I swore at 3 and 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning when I started to hear the birds chirp that I was not going to do this again. I was not going to pick up. I was not going to call my dealer. I swore to God. I got on my knees to whatever higher power there was. I said, God, I can't do this anymore. Please, I'm not going to do this again. And I must have gone through this ceremony of begging for help 1,000 times. And I'd wake up, maybe I'd fall asleep at 5, 6 in the morning. I'd wake up 8, 9, whatever. And, at this time, I get to my job and I'd be, I'd look disheveled and I didn't sleep deprived. And I still said I wasn't going to use, and I have a coffee and have a second coffee. And then by lunch, I'd get some food inside of me, started to feel a little bit better. And by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I said, you know what, I better get high tonight. And there was the call to the dealer, and I pick up at 5 o'clock, and I do the same thing over and over again. So as you know, Uncle, my dad, Sid, he was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. He found a solution in AA, and he planted the seed, as we say in our fellowship. How did we find this fellowship? Well, my father brought me to some AA meetings in 1982. I was 27 years old. I did not believe I had a problem still. I still had that issue of not believing I had a problem with drugs or alcohol, but there was too much shit hitting the fan. in every aspect of my life. And so I was trying to get everyone off my back. So he brought me to a meeting one day, and there was a speaker in this AA meeting. His name was Gino. And Gino talked about Valium. Now, Alcoholics Anonymous, for those who are not really know the story, Alcoholics Anonymous' sole purpose is to help alcoholics. Their first step is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. That's their first step. If you want to talk about pills, marijuana, fentanyl, heroin, any other type of drug in Alcoholics Anonymous, they say it's an outside issue to their fellowship. And I understand that. They have a soulness of purpose to help the alcoholics. You smoke dope once in a while, that's an outside issue. We only want to help alcohol as long as you stay off of alcohol. And so this guy, Gino, in 1982-83, talking about Valium was quite an eye-opener. And I went over to him after the meeting and I asked him to be my sponsor. And that's what they tell you to do in these meetings. But this is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And Gino gave me the big book and he put his phone number in it. And he said, call me. And of course, I never called him. To make a long story short, October 26, 1983, I got a knock on my door in my apartment. And a knock on my apartment door on a Sunday morning is trouble. It's whoever's on the other side of the door knocking on it only wants something or wants to give me grief, because at this point, my parents had disowned me. They passed over the power of attorney to Gino because I was writing suicide letters to my family that I wanted to commit suicide. My uncle Davey would come into my apartment twice with police, bringing me to the psych ward, hoping to find me alive, which they did. They bring me to the psych ward and I talked myself out of it. And so I was, I figured if there's a knock on the door, if I stopped breathing and didn't move, the problem on the other side of the door would leave because it was only a problem. The mailbox opened up and it said, Robert, it's Gino, let me in. So there's this guy, Gino, who I asked to be my sponsor 3-4 months previous to this. He comes into my apartment, and my apartment was a bachelor apartment. It was upside down, ashtrays with mountains of cigarette butts on either side of the bed, beer bottles, alcohol empties everywhere. It was upside down. And Gino walked in and he said, Robert, the police are downstairs. And it just so happened his sponsor is a policeman here in Montreal. And he said, he's downstairs. John's downstairs. And we're taking you to the psych ward. You're gone because we're going to sign you away for 6 months because we're concerned you're going to kill yourself. Or you can go away to treatment. So this was an easy decision, right, for me. I wasn't going to go to no psych ward, right? I'm going to go away to treatment. Again, to be my 4th treatment. I know what to do there. Find the most powerful person in the treatment facility, befriend them, so I can slide my way through the weeks of being in treatment and get my ass out of there. That was my idea of a solution. I had no idea that this would be the last time I would use any mind-altering substance. On that day, October 26, 1983. A week later, I got on a plane. I went to Center City, Minnesota. Center City, Minnesota has a treatment facility still there called Hazelton. At that time, it was world-renowned. It still is. I know they have other branches in Florida and different places, and it's a big industry now, recovery centers and rehabs. And I remember the bill, I still have the bill, was $2,500 US. And I told my dad I'd pay him back on a monthly basis when I got back. And I did pay him back a few checks. And after $200-300 of me paying him back, he said, As long as you stay sober, Dee Dee, you don't have to pay anymore. But I got into treatment. They gave me this big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. The treatment facility is based on the 12 steps, on the solution of 12 steps that I live by today. You don't go through the 12 steps once, finish it, come see, come saw, it's over, and then move on. The 12 steps is something that I implicated into my life on a daily basis, and it's helped me. Today, it helps me every single day. But they kickstarted it, and I went through the first 5 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. There was no Cocaine Anonymous in my life at that point. CA did start in 1982 in California. So it was a year old, but it wasn't in Montreal. It wasn't international at that point. And after 30 days of treatment, my counselor told me this. I just want to say, when I was in treatment, I did realize that they were talking about a higher power. And they never brought in a religion. They never talked about Allah or Jesus or Moses, but they did talk about that I had to start to move out of the driver's seat, get my hands off the wheel, because the way I was controlling my life from that point up to 28 years old, I was not a success at it, and try to turn my life over to a higher power, whatever I would consider a higher power. I remember being in treatment, sitting outside at the lake, looking at the leaves in the trees, looking for a sign. I'm Jewish. We would go to church on Sundays, and I would go and I would take the bread, the offering, in my mouth every Sunday while I was in treatment, because I was looking for a solution. And what happened in this treatment facility was a complete change in my thought process. I became willing, I became open to a possibility of actually living every day sober. It was a huge idea to try to understand and comprehend, to try to stay sober. But I was trying to do it, as I said, one day at a time. And my counselor told me after 30 days, Robert, you have a 95% chance of maintaining your sobriety if you attend 12-step meetings, and you have less than a 5% chance if you don't. Very clear, very clear. So people call up their AA meetings, or they call up CA, and they go to 1 meeting a week, 2 meetings a week. You have a 0% chance of staying sober. And that's after you've been trying your own way of trying to get sober a billion other ways. Because the last bastion of help that any alcoholic or drug addict goes to is the AA meeting or the CA meeting, the church at the end of a one-way street in a church basement. And we all think that everybody in those rooms are bad people and people off the street. And none of us want to actually accept that we're that low that we have to go to meetings, right? And they say to go to 90 meetings in 90 days when you first come in. And a lot of people don't. They go to 1 or 2. They have no chance to stay sober. No chance. Gino picked me up at the airport. And that's after 30 days. And he brought me to a meeting every day, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I loved it. There was all these old people, 60 and 70 and 80-year-old old people there, people smoking cigarettes. And there'd be clouds of cigarettes in those days. But people would talk about sobriety. And I found my own clique of young people in Alcoholics Anonymous. Listen, I was a drug addict hiding out in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's who I was. And I accepted it. I needed a solution. And if I didn't care if they said alcohol in the front, I just changed it to cocaine in my head. The solution, the big book, is written for, in 1935 it was written, I think it was printed in 1938, 39, whatever. It was written for alcoholics, but we've all taken it, all addictions have taken this book as our solution. You just change the word alcohol to drugs, to your drug of choice. So in 1985, we had the World Convention here in Montreal, and it was an unbelievable event here in Montreal. The 50th World Convention of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was held here in Montreal. I still have the pamphlet, 50 years. The whole city was taken over by alcoholics. And I went to the Olympic Stadium with my buddy Dave and a whole bunch of other people. And the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill Wilson, who had already passed away, his cousin's sister who touched him spoke at the meeting. You know, we were 50,000 addicts, alcoholics, saying the Lord's Prayer at the end. It was a very uplifting experience. I'll never forget that. And Dave met this girl. Her name was Siobhan. That's a special name, Siobhan. And he met her, and she was from California. He went to California a few months later to meet her. And he called me, Dave, because his drug of choice was the same as mine, was cocaine. You know, that's what we used to do. We used to line up the coke and just snort our brains out and smoke freebase before crack was even invented. And I don't know why they call it freebase, because all it did was take every cent of your penny, every money out of your pocket. But Dave called me and he said, Robert, I was at Cedars-Sinai Hospital here in LA, and there was 200 addicts at a meeting, and it was called Cocaine Anonymous. And I go, what? He said, yes, there's CA meeting here. It was unbelievable. And my ears just perked up, and I called up, I looked up the head office telephone number, and it was in Culver City, California. And I called them up, said, Robert from Montreal, can you mail me a starter's kit? Don't forget, there's no internet at that point, right? And, you know, the phones and no cell phones. And a week later or so, I got a brown envelope. I'll never forget, I was with Dave and this other guy named Zarko at this Monday AA meeting, and I opened up this brown envelope with the format to meetings of alcohol, of Cocaine Anonymous. And the first step, the first time I saw it in print was there, and it blew me away, because it says this: we admitted we were powerless over cocaine and all other mind-altering substances, and that our lives had become unmanageable. And Cocaine Anonymous is an all-inclusive fellowship. We don't care if you're only alcoholic, only marijuana, pothead, fentanyl, crystal meth, alcohol, whatever, regular cocaine user, barbiturate. We accept everybody. There's nobody different than other. It's not the drug. It's what it's what the substance does to us, and we have a solution to that. So when I saw that, I knew we needed this, and I called up a church that we were having this AA meeting at. We were every Wednesday night. We went to this young people's and AA meeting in the west end of the city. I called up the pastor. I said, and I was concerned that he wouldn't accept it, right? Because cocaine is still illegal. And in 1986, at that time when I called him, it was illegal still. I said, I'm Robert. I'm a member of the AA meeting, and I'd like to start a CA meeting here. Is that possible? He said, any night is available except for Wednesday and Sunday. I said, how about Thursday? He said, sure. So the word went around Montreal in the fellowships of AA and NA that we were starting Cocaine Anonymous. And people were questioning me. My friends in the fellowship were going, why are you starting this meeting? Like, what's wrong with us? Like, you don't really need to start that. And it's not even the point of looking at it. I just wanted to go to one CA meeting a week, and the rest of the 6 days I would go to my AA meetings. On August 21st, so it's just last week, 1986, the first CA meeting was held in Montreal, the first CA meeting outside of the United States. It was in Canada, here in Montreal. And we were 13 addicts, alcoholics, that showed up at that meeting. And it was fantastic. Dave was the speaker. I was the secretary. Zarko was the chairperson. And I was very happy with that one meeting. And little did I know that this snowball going down the hill, it had an effect. And I saw a fellowship grow up around me. And I had nothing to do with it. Zarko, who was a pill addict, wanted a meeting every day. By January of 1987, so 4 months later, we had 7 meetings going, one every day, 7 English, 2 French, and 1 bilingual. And the bilingual meeting was on Saturday night where you'd have 200 people.
Wow.
It was wild. And what was even crazier, we were so fucked, excuse my language. Why were we fucked? They said there was no sobriety in CA, and they were right. I had the most. I had 3.5 years of sobriety, and everybody else had less. And we went through such growing pains to get to this point, but there was something else working other than me, Zarko, or Dave. There was this power, this spirit in these young people that wanted this solution to pass it on. So CA has a conference on an annual basis. They have a convention every year, which is a fundraiser. It supports the fellowship. It creates a lot of enthusiasm for the fellowship. But they have a conference once a year, which is a working conference. And they have it at Labor Day weekend. And right now they're having it this weekend in Dallas, Texas. They're having their world conference where they talk about the business of CA. And every place in the planet where there are CA meetings gets a vote. And it's brought to the conference by a voted in delegate of that city area. So I was voted in the delegate of our area here in Montreal, and I had 1 vote. I went at that point. The conference was in Manhattan Beach in California, and I went down there in 1988. And you have a roll call. So every state, says, hello, I'm John from Arizona, and I have 4 votes. The more meetings you get, the more votes you get. And it goes around the room to all the American cities. And then it came to me, and I went, I'm Robert. I'm a drug addict from Montreal, Canada, and I have 1 vote. And the room went crazy because it was the first time a delegate from outside of the United States attended the conference, and it made them international. Wow. Right now, there's CA meetings all over the world. Throughout, I was just at the World Conference in Amsterdam, early July. I went to Amsterdam, I then went to Denmark, and I went to Sweden. Not many people do have 40 years of sobriety, and I was asked to share at 3 different meetings in their language. You know, the meetings were held in their language, in Dutch and Danish and in Swedish. And my share, of course, was in English. Everyone is perfectly bilingual there in English and their mother tongue. And it was beautiful. In Montreal, right now, we have over 100 meetings a week. In Toronto, there's over 250 meetings on a weekly basis.
Wow.
In California, there's hundreds upon hundreds of meetings in Arizona, in Florida, in Texas, in New York, in Philadelphia, in New Jersey, it's Chicago World Convention. In Seattle, I was at the World Convention in years past. It's all in all the provinces in Canada. So what happened was CA just grew like wildfire here in Canada. And you know, I could go on forever, but I just want to talk a little bit about solution, because it's fine and dandy to talk about the growth, but I want to talk about solution that maybe someone who has a problem with drugs or alcohol, or everybody knows somebody who has a problem with drugs or alcohol. a family member or a friend, you know, all you got to do is look online, ca.org, ca.org. That's simple. It'll take you to the Cocaine Anonymous World site. You click in meetings, you click in your state, your city, and they'll show all the meetings that are available there. A lot of them are hybrid, Zoom and live. There's hotline numbers you can call and get immediate help right now. And in any part of the world, the meetings are listed on ca.org. These 12 steps transformed my life. I had to understand why I was using and abusing mind-altering substances because I did not feel comfortable inside myself. I had a hole inside of me. I had low self-esteem. I had fear. There was lots of anger, resentment. I had resentments against everybody because I couldn't point the finger. You know, I was pointing the finger at them, but really the pointing the finger should have been at me. I should have the biggest resentment against my type of attitude. And through these 12 steps, I was able to pinpoint what were my character defects, you know, my low self-esteem, my resentments. And I listed them. I listed them. I wrote it, I put pen to paper with my sponsor. This is all done with your sponsor. And I made a list of basically what I went through, large catastrophic events that I do remember. I would list them, and you know why I had anger to my father. What was the reason why? You know, and explain the fear and that I was going through, and write it on a piece of paper. And that's the fourth step. And then the fifth step, I actually read this paper to my sponsor and to our higher power, who's always in the rooms with us. Oy. Knowing what these character defects were, I in steps 6 and 7, I asked God to remove them from me, to remove my character defects, and I actually work on them on a daily basis because my character defects still come up every day, you know, here and there. So it is helpful. 8 and 9, you know, with the list that I made, I had to make amends. I had to make amends. You got to clean the slate. I had to clean my slate. And, you know, my middle name was I'm sorry. You know, I would say that to my parents 1,000 times. I'm sorry. Or my boss, I'm sorry. Or my girlfriend or my fiance, I'm sorry. Whatever. And it was enough of all this I'm sorry time, you know, amends. And I decided to make living amends. The people that I made amends to were to my mother and father. That were the two main people that I needed to make amends to. And it was enough for me to say, it wasn't enough for me to say, I'm sorry. I had to live sober. So by living sober, I made my amends to my family. My father would say, I don't know how a devil became such an angel. My father said, how could you, the worst son in the world, become the best? You know, I gave my father heart attacks. He had 2 of them. My mother had shingles and nervous breakdowns because of my actions and my abuse. So living, you know, I had to make my amends to them, you know, and what we do in this fellowship is try to continue to pass on this message on a daily basis. They say to go to 90 meetings in 90 days in the beginning. I went to 365 meetings in the first year. I used to go to meeting every day. I got active in service. What is active in service? There's meetings every day, right? And you go there and there'd be newcomers there, and you put out your hand and you give out your phone number, and then you take the newcomer through the big book. The solution is in the first 103 pages of the big book. So the big book is thick, right? These are stories from actual members of how their lives had changed. But the first 103 pages is the solution that was written by Bill Wilson and the first 100 members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's where the solution lies. And I went through that, and I go through that with my sponsees. I would say the solution rate of long-term sobriety is unfortunately very low, even in our fellowship. Maybe it's 10%.
Wow.
So if you go to a meeting, any place that it's 30%, it's 50% recovery is BS. I know what the story is. People come in, they will sell their soul. They are so serious. They are in such a state of readiness to get sober. They've hit their bottom. And what happens is the disease takes over. Give them a month, give them 2 months. They get a little money in their pocket. They get weight in their, they starting to feel a little bit better. They got sleep and they starting to think, maybe I can have one drink. You know, my drug of choice is cocaine. Maybe I can drink like a normal person. Everybody thinks like that. Maybe I can have one line. You know, I'm not going to pick up an ounce or a whatever. I'm just going to just pick up a little bit, do a little line, and that's it. And you know what? I'll be okay. And that happens 90% of the time. People relapse. The fortunate ones are able to come back to meetings. A lot of people relapse. A lot of them come back and are able to get sober. Long-term sobriety is fantastic. And, you know, the fellowship is strong here in Montreal. It's strong in Toronto. It's strong all over the world. And you do have core members that pass on the solution. I just wish more people would stick and stay. It's the nature of the disease. You know, my life is just fantastic, Bruce. You know, 40 plus years of sobriety. I've worked in the clothing industry all my life. I've become successful in my life. The promises have all come through. The finances is not important. The most important thing is how I feel inside. And I feel good. And the reason why I feel good is because life is good.
Yeah.
And my higher power does not want me to smoke crack. My higher power, Bruce, doesn't want me to take drugs. My higher power doesn't want me to drink alcohol. My higher power wants me to enjoy life. My higher power wants me to stay sober. My higher power wants me to stay happy. I did not come into Cocaine Anonymous to die. I came into Cocaine Anonymous to enjoy my life. My higher power wants me to sleep at night. My higher power wants me to help another addict. My higher power only wants peace for me. And so when I have turmoil, and when the turmoil, it's not in my belly, and it's in everybody's body, and it's in the normies' body, normal people, it's up here. It's in the head. It's the way I'm going to think. It's my ego and how I feel. And when I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go to the bathroom, and then I'm thinking about some late delivery or something with a customer or a relationship with somebody, and I'm trying to figure out the solution and I'm making myself crazy. That's not the way it is. And I try to put myself back to sleep. Most of the time I'm successful because everything works out. Nothing ever did not work out in any problem in the last 40 years. Everything worked out.
Correct.
Everything. So life has been great. And that's a quick synopsis of my story.
Unbelievable meeting. Unbelievable.
When we share in our meetings, I'm a lot more descriptive on the solution and talking more about solution and the 12 steps and this higher power idea. It's something that really I highly suggest people to be open and willing to this type of solution because it does work. It really does work. So if there's 1,000 addicts that are going to come into this room in the next few months, 100, 150 are going to stay sober, and maybe 200 or 300 of them are going to come back after relapse or more, and so that's just the way it is, and it does work. CA is all over the world, ca.org. You can catch us online, and it's a beautiful thing. My whole life is around CA. I'm very grateful to this fellowship. I'm grateful to my friends in this fellowship. I'm grateful to the people here and my sponsees who show me something new about myself and about them every day. I keep in contact with them. That's how we do it. And that's about it for now.
That's a lot, Didi. This is unbelievable. I just have one question that I can't get out of my mind, and I need to ask you. Because when we got together in your early teens, in your middle teens, when you guys came to Boston, when we could get down to Florida, I never saw you out of control. I just saw someone who was enjoying himself, having a good time in life, open to partying and having fun. And I am a normie. I admit it. Did you go out of your way to hide what you were doing? Because I didn't see anything.
Okay, so in Boston, I think I was like 16, 17 years old. 16, 17 years old, and I was controlling it pretty good. I wasn't doing it on a daily basis at that point. I remember in Florida waking up at a disco on the floor, dance floor, looking up with the sheriff looking down at me.
Oh boy.
In one of those with the big hats, and that's all I remember. So wow. I was pretty screwed up then, and I was using all the time when I went down to Florida when I was staying with my parents. It was out of control. As I got older. Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough for spending time with us and sharing your story. It's so unique, and it's not unique. It's so right. Incredible, and yet so many people are hurting from this. Because, I've just learned so much from you from this show about your life, about what a tough time you had in your teens and into your 20s, and so sorry to hear. I went off to college, and I really didn't know that much about what was going on. Right. In a way, I wish I could have been there more for you. But I want to thank you for doing the show, and I think from this show, a lot of people are going to be helped.
It was a pleasure being with you, Bruce. We loved it.
And now that we've done this show together, we're going to stay closer in touch.
Most definitely.
God bless, my friend. Thank you again.
I'll see you in Florida soon.
See you in Florida. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.